Well, you can't trust county.
What I was going to say is that I know you were saying there's yard work going on outside. It's a county police convention here.
It is a convention?
It's actually a convention.
You know, there are lots of things, and there's very little time in this world. I think of all the things for us as a collective to invest our time in. A county police convention.
County police.
It's not high on my list.
It has been non-stop.
Who's paying for that convention? Who's sponsoring it?
Taxpayers, maybe, if I
No,
guess. DC. But
you're going to disrupt my digestion.
I know. Well, it's been crazy, though, because I was like, well, they're going to be going up and down the freaking street all day. Like, I don't know when we're going to be able to record.
Are they like
And
blaring
silent
sirens or
today.
something? Are they just
Yes.
like...
Yeah, they'll just start like revving the engines and then just doing the sirens. I thought it was like the president coming by or something, but it's just this freaking county police convention.
No, this does not bode well for my blood pressure.
I know. And I was going to say, the rest of this case is not going to
Blowed.
Blowed. What would blowed be? That's like blown out and... and you're bloated. You're blown out and you're bloated. Baby, I'm blowed today.
I'm so blowed.
Oh my God.
Well, it's a spin-off of Mama Gloge because that's
Mama
the voice.
Gloge.
So I'm blowed, baby.
That's right.
This day knocked me out. I am blowed.
Oh my
Not
God.
Not blown, but blowed.
I'm blowed. I'm Mama Gloge and I'm blowed. Well, I think this case is going to be one where you're going to feel a little blowed. It's going to be pretty hefty. I will say there's just a lot of detail to it. So I will try to power through, and I'll just go ahead and start with our top line because it's a pretty shocking one.
Okay.
Our story starts in the early morning hours of New Year's Eve, 2009, in none other than New York City, which is like literally the place to be for a lot of people that are celebrating New Year's Eve.
Yeah, the second you said it, that's what I imagined. I always imagine New Year's Eve in New York City.
I know, like crazy Times Square stuff. We're a little bit further up than Times Square, but yeah, it's, you know, the time of year where you are getting so ready to look forward to all the possibilities for the next year. And unfortunately, something tragic was occurring in the early morning hours on West 68th Street, right at around 7 a.m. It starts with a terrifying image. The body of 47-year-old Shele Covlin found in her bathtub in a pool of bloody, still water. And as if that isn't terrifying enough, imagine seeing this as her 9-year-old daughter, Anna Covlin, who allegedly made the initial discovery. Yeah, isn't that awful?
That's so sad.
Anna flies down the hallway to grab her dad, 36-year-old Rod Covlin, telling him that something horrible has happened to Mom. And when he enters the scene, he's completely horrified. He sees his wife there lying seemingly lifeless in their bathtub. And he runs and he grabs a comforter from the bed. He pulls her out of the tub and immediately starts performing CPR. And nothing happens. She's not breathing. And what's worse, though, is he looks up and notices one of the built-in storage cabinets that's kind of like right in front of their bathtub is off of its hinges. So he thinks to himself, oh my God, my wife must have slipped
Tried to grab it,
trying to grab something out of the cabinet. And he's doing CPR. He calls 911. He's frantically telling them that I think my wife is dead. He continues to perform it until the EMTs arrive. And all the while, he's trying to conceal this image from his daughter. And they also had a 4-year-old son, Miles, trying to resuscitate her, and nothing is working. And it is determined that Shele Covlin, a beloved mother, wife, and sister, is dead via this tragic accident as she attempted to take a bath that morning. But not all was as it seemed, because behind closed doors, Shele had secrets, some of which she had confided in friends and family. And as some of those secrets started to unfold, investigators and Shele's family become increasingly convinced that this may not have been an accident. Maybe someone was out to get her and ensure that she would never see the year 2010. So, before we dive in to this very mysterious backstory that leads to this death, I just want to say welcome back to our creepers for another Friday episode of CreepTime, the podcast. I was going to also say, like, welcome do you have any thoughts? But I was like, I'm like, welcome back, babies.
You do. I must have done that to you too, but you do tend to leave me in these like heightened states, and you're like, and now, welcome back.
Welcome
How are
back.
you
Well,
guys?
baby, it's called climax.
But I never get to finish.
I know. You dirty mind. But yeah, we are your hosts. I am Stu. This is Silas Dean, the salacious Silas Dean. With
Salacious
that comment,
again.
baby.
Oh, okay.
Again, but well, only because you made that comment. I actually had written down silently devilish Silas Dean, but I'm like, this took
Silently,
it corny real quick.
not an adjective I'm familiar with.
Silently. Well, I am. That's what ChatGPT came up with, and I was like, that's bad. I'm leaving that out. But there's a little behind
Call the
curtain
writers.
for you. Yeah. But we bring you guys new episodes of True Crime every single week, and you can watch us on Spotify and YouTube and stream us audio wherever you get your podcast on Apple or Amazon, also Spotify. And if you are new here or if you've been here since the dawn of time, babies, please leave us a review, and you can comment to us on Spotify or honestly any of our like social media platforms. You can leave us comments on our Instagrams, on our Reddit page. That's where we get a ton of interaction with you guys. And it really
Lots of
helps
case
us.
suggestions too.
Yes. And it really helps us grow our show. And we are so appreciative of that. And anything you want to say, baby?
Well, I always just like to say word of mouth because we're so
Yeah.
appreciative of course, all the comments and the interactions. But really, Stu and I both feel that anytime you rope somebody into the CreepTime family and they become a creeper, whether it's a partner, family member, coworker, whoever it may be, that is the most paramount for growing the show and getting the stories out to more people.
Yes. Word of frickin' mouth. And also like just passing along Can't Trust County to other people just feels really good. Because I do
It's
find
like a
myself,
secret code.
it's like a secret code. I do find myself saying it like out loud to myself just about various things. I'm like, you can't trust county, but like applying it to
Are
other
you usually
things.
rocking back and forth in a padded cell?
Yeah.
Can't trust county.
Can't trust county. So with that, are you ready to dive into the case of Shele Covlin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 2009. What a very specific era in New York.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that because I actually tapped a good friend of mine that lived right around the corner from the Covlins when I was doing research on this case. And they remembered it. Like they remembered this being well, not only that, I hope she wouldn't mind me sharing this, but they knew the PI that was involved with this.
Oh, I thought they were going to say they knew the family. That's crazy.
Yeah, which I will not reveal that for her sake and her family's sake. But I was like, wait, what? She was like, yeah, that was a big case at that time. But yes, very
I'm
specific.
shocked I haven't heard about it before. Can I look at the first page of pictures?
Yeah, please. I was going to tell you that. And Creepers will have all this up on Reddit.
My God, that scared the out of me. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to swear. Wow, my heart's racing. I'm crying. That box just opened up by itself.
Oh.
You saw me before we started, and I took that box from behind me and put it over there in the kitchen. The second you just said, I won't, you said something like, I won't reveal that for the sake of her family. That box just flew open. That scared the absolute shit out of me. I'm sorry. I'll let it in.
No, it's okay. That's possibly spirit, baby.
Oh,
We've had it
that
happen before
was
on this.
Scary.
Oh my God. Now I'm scared. You just scared me via
I'm
osmosis.
literally
Okay.
tearing. What the hell?
I was already scared. Okay.
Go on. Sorry.
Bring it together. Okay. So, anyways, Creepers, we will have these up on Reddit. These pictures of Shele and some of the crime scene photos and all that good stuff. So, first, let me give you a little bit more context about Shele and the type of woman that she was and what made her maybe the object of desire and then hate in someone's eyes. So, from what I read, Shele was extremely driven and smart. She was warm and funny, and her Jewish faith was extremely important to her. I was reading that in her sister Eve's eulogy, actually, that despite having a full-time career and 2 kids, sometimes her sister enjoyed writing what's called a divrei or a divar Torah. And shout out to my friend Haley that I consulted about this case. She was like, let me tell you how to pronounce those so you don't butcher them. So thank you, Haley. But anyways, she was telling me that a divrei Torah is basically you'll take the Torah, you'll read it, and then you'll kind of write like a short essay to yourself about like what you took away from that theme. So if that colors who Shele was, like almost like, Bible study in a sense was like very important to her. Torah study. She was very devout in her religion. And just like that brought her a lot of comfort. So at this time, she was also working closely with her father, Joel, and her brother, Philip, and their family-owned financial services company, which was called Danishevsky Wealth Management. That's her maiden name. And at this point, she had been working with her father for over 25 years. She worked for him under Merrill Lynch at first, which this was also a touching thing I read. There were lots of articles that were published about Shele and the financial group, but I was reading this one quote that she said where she said, "My dad basically came to me after college and said, let's do a 6-month trial. And if you're happy, you'll stay. And if you're not, or if our working relationship puts a strain on our father-daughter relationship, then you can go your own way." And she just continually made this joke that like she's still on a trial basis with her dad. So I think she had like a good sense of humor too. And you can probably see, I think I have pictures of them on that first page.
Yeah, I was just looking through it. She instantly reminded me of Kim Cattrall. She has a very similar haircut.
I literally wrote that in my research. I'm not even kidding.
She looks
at one
just like
point.
she also. I mean, the second that you mentioned she was Jewish as well, I thought of Judith Light, which is not as she's not as well known, but she's a very
yeah, she
famous,
does kind of look like her though.
yeah, famous Jewish actress. But yeah, similar like with the sort of bleach blonde, like bang cut, layered haircut.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. I thought Kim Cattrall too.
Yeah, I think
So
it's
yeah,
the blazer with the blonde hair combo. I think that's
yes,
what it
and
is.
like power woman in New York City.
Mhm.
But she admired her dad so much. She loved her career. And she eventually moved with him to UBS, where they would launch their own branch of their like family's financial services firm.
Mhm.
She was vice president of investments. So I'm sure, as you can imagine, she had a very healthy salary. She was well dressed, well spoken. She was members of some pretty fancy social clubs in Manhattan, which included the Friars Club, which have to always talk about any sort of Roni connection. Jill Zarin was also a member of the Friars Club. I remember seeing that on an episode.
I didn't know that. Huh.
Now, before she met her husband, Rod, or his name was Roderick Covlin, she was the object of a lot of guys' affection. You can probably see from pictures, like you were saying, she's very, put together.
She's
Short
beautiful.
blonde hair.
Yeah.
She's beautiful. She enjoyed staying in good shape, and she was actually pretty petite. And I just mentioned that because it is relevant to the case later on. But she was only 5'4". Yeah. So this is where I said reminds me of Kim Cattrall. She's like your classic modern New York City working woman, and her
Yeah.
career came first and foremost to her. And I don't think she was someone that felt, even like from a religious context, like any pressure to get married at a young age. I think she enjoyed being single from her 20s into her 30s. But all of that changed in 1998 when she went to a Jewish singles mixer, and it was there that she met and fell madly in love with Rod Covlin. And her sister actually remembers her calling her that night and saying, "I've met the love of my life. I've met this incredible guy." They were so synced on like every level, definitely on her religious beliefs, which was so important to her. They were both modern Orthodox, and she was confident that Rod was going to be the one. She even mentioned to her sister that she wanted to elope the next day, which is a little crazy, but that's how intense
Maybe
she
like
felt about him.
like jokingly, or hard
I
to
don't think
say?
so.
No.
Not jokingly.
Head
She
over
was like,
heels.
I would marry him tomorrow, like, but not
Mm.
jokingly. So any initial thoughts? Because I think there's a picture of them on the first page, but how do you feel about the two of them together, or any additional just vibes you're gathering from
Mm.
Shele?
I mean, everything that you said before kind of tracks, but just to confirm, because you said at this point she's in her 40s at the time of her death, and he's younger. He's in his 30s.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, so she's going for a younger guy. I don't know how to feel about it one way or the other just yet.
Mhm.
I also did not know that Covlin is a Jewish last name. That's news to me.
Well, it's Rod's last name, but I guess well, he was Jewish too. So
he was at the Jewish single mixers.
yeah. I was
apparently.
just saying Covlin. Yeah,
He's Charlotte York.
Yeah.
Jewish singles mixer.
Because Danishevsky, that probably tracks as like immediately would ring more like Jewish sounding. But yeah, Covlin, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so she's working with her father at this point for sure.
Mhm.
Like they're in the family business together.
Yeah.
Do you know if she was an only child?
No, so she had a brother and a sister.
That's what I see in the picture. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And they were all very, very close. Like the Danishevskys as a little family unit were super close. But really, Philip and Shele worked together like daily. So they were
Mm.
super, super close. But we'll come to find out that Eve, I think, was even closer with Shele than Philip was.
I don't have many more like things to input just yet. I am curious about this one picture of it says younger Rod, and it looks like he's sitting at a table in a conference room in a hotel wearing a camo hoodie. Any context on that?
You're probably like, and how did we arrive there? very funny you should point that out because it does matter. I kind of
It does.
purposely
Okay.
blocked out the bottom half of that, but he is sitting at a backgammon table. He was a huge backgammon player, and that will play a huge part in this case, actually.
I'm feeling very. What is backgammon?
Okay, this is so funny. I wrote in my research, does anybody actually know what backgammon is? I literally said, ask Silas, because I sort of know what backgammon is, but isn't
Is
it
it a
like,
table game, like a card game?
it's a table game. It's the one like with all the triangles and you're moving. I think you just like move checkers back and forth until you get yours on all of yours on one side of the table and you knock the other
Oh,
person's off.
niche. Okay, so he's at like a convention for this, or he's
Yes.
playing a game. And
Yeah,
okay,
he's at
got
a
it.
tournament.
In
Yeah.
full hunting gear.
In full camo, baby. Yeah. Which it's funny you mentioned that just even from that picture because I think there's two rods. There's that rod and then there's like a New York socialite rod. So just keep
Mm.
that in mind. But that's very perceptive. You kind of like picked up on that initially.
It just stuck out to me, so I wanted to ask about it. It could have gone nowhere, but I was curious. But I'll
Yeah.
let you keep pressing on.
No, you're right. So thankfully Eve, her sister, does the right thing and she goes, whoa, let's slow our roll. Can you give me some stats on this Rod guy? And like you were picking up on, Rod was 11 years younger than Shele. And that did kind of raise, a flag for Eve. She was like, what does this guy do? And she tells her, no, he's got a great career. He's a stockbroker. We kind of run in the same circles. And I don't know. I don't want to be too harsh or be ageist, but I think it is like important for a sister to raise, just make sure that all is kosher because she was a big wig financial services advisor. She had a very, very healthy salary, which I'll describe later. But it was, of course, they had this really intense physical attraction. He was this like strapping 25-year-old guy at the time that she met him, worked in stocks, and he had told her, I'm this like amazing backgammon player. And right then it was just sort of like a hobby for him.
Mhm.
But he played at a professional level and would continue that on into their relationship. So I think she thought that it was like a cool hobby of his at first, but things would take a turn
Yeah.
later
It's like
on.
how Jennifer Tilly's a pro poker player. It's like, that's a fun fact.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so he at the time too was earning a lot of money from backgammon, so much so that he went on later to help found the U.S. Backgammon Federation. And even though they didn't elope the next day, thank God, Rod and Shele ended up getting married pretty quickly after meeting, within 6 months. And she, a couple of weeks later, went right up to Scarsdale, where his parents lived, met them, fell in love with his family, and the rest was sort of history. And they ended up getting married, and they had their first child, their daughter Anna, within 2 years of meeting uh, or getting married. They also
Mhm.
had another son who I mentioned, Miles, but I wanted to include this in case it colors their relationship in any way for you, that Shele and Rod also had twins in between Anna and Miles, and they both died shortly after Shele gave birth
Oh
from medical
no.
complications. Yeah, which is so sad.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
yeah, horrific. But I think it had, if I had to guess, a pretty profound impact on them as a couple. And I think when something like that happens, either the grief brings you closer or it creates a little bit of a crack. And I think for them,
Mhm.
created a crack, but also because of their religious beliefs, he sort of felt like that was one of her duties as his wife to give him children. And that was sort of a failure in his eyes, which is
Oh,
awful to think about. But that's something in their religious beliefs that they kind of felt like was a
I was
misstep
gonna
for
say a
them.
little more orthodox than I thought.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Um,
Don't like that.
yeah. And even though their romance started out as like sort of this whirlwind, by the late 90s, it was starting to shift. And when they reached 2009, when our story takes place, it was pretty rocky to say the least. Now, I know I said that they did a pretty good job of, kind of concealing this or concealing this heartaches that they were going through, but
Mhm.
Shele did confide in a couple of people about their marital troubles, and one of those was her sister Eve. And Eve knew pretty much everything about their relationship, especially in the last years of her life, where she said her sister was being put through the ringer with her marriage to Rod. Now, most people didn't know this, but Rod had at this point pretty much abandoned his career as a stockbroker and become obsessed with backgammon. I would say probably you could call it an addiction to backgammon, and it really spiraled. And Shelley would call her sister regularly to vent about it. That he was just sort of like a deadbeat, and I don't like using that term, but I can't think of a better phrase to use. Um, at one point, his obsession was so bad that his own parents actually called him and said, do we need to come down there and get you and like stage an intervention? And I think also they were embarrassed because Shelley was the breadwinner of the family at that point, and which
Hmm.
is, listen, to each their own. That's a great thing, I think, for a lot of reasons. But
No, but it's useful to call out considering that there seems to be this like traditional contention between them about the
mhm,
loss of the children.
yes,
But the thing that they're willing to overlook, or he's willing to overlook, is that she's fronting all the money for their lifestyle
yeah,
while he's off gambling, essentially.
yes. Actually, tradition plays a huge part in a lot of this case, and like gets in the way sometimes of being able to uncover things even quicker than we might have. But anyways, I'll press on. You you might call that like good parenting, his parents wanting to stage the intervention, but I think a lot of what they were saying to Rod was that they needed to have their own reputation protected. They were also very well connected in the New York City scene, and they had heard from friends of theirs who lived in Manhattan that Shelley had been seen solo with some people, particularly attractive guys, at the Friars Club, and people were starting to talk. And it was awkward because I think at the level of Orthodox that they practice, divorce was obviously not ideal, but to act as if all was well and good, but then go around town and kind of like publicly display that it was obviously not, felt
Hmm.
in a odd way. It was like even worse for the Covlins, and also the Danishevskis weren't very happy about this either. But the Covlins were very vocal about like you guys need to get this on track or make a decision and part ways. Which, going off of that, because Shelley did make enough money to support their entire family, she decided to do something that I'm not sure I would have chosen to do, but she decided that because they were no longer spending time together and falling out of love, she would rent out the apartment across from their unit as well. And that apartment could be Rod's. And this was her effort to keep their life semi normal for the kids while they figured out their separation and if things were going to go in the actual direction of divorce.
Hmm.
But I feel like it still sort of indicates a level of care for him. But bankrolling an entire apartment unit, which I should mention is not cheap where they were living, they lived on 68th and
Well, I was
Broadway,
gonna
which
say, I
is
was like, that's, I mean, you've got money to burn.
yeah, yeah. Which it's like basically Creepers if you've been to New York or if you've lived there. It's like literally right next to Lincoln Center. Like this is a
My previous
very
roommate, his parents were doing that because
oh
he,
really?
rich kid, rich kid, grew up in Malibu. So they have, of course, a property up in Malibu. But I guess his mom and his father were not doing well. So she was renting a whole one-bedroom apartment down in Hancock Park, which is like in central LA. And I just thought that was so interesting. I mean, obviously, if they live in Malibu, they've got enough money to burn. But I was like, because we went there because she was giving us like a hutch or something. There was like a furniture piece she didn't want. So I actually went to the apartment and it like clicked for me. I was like, this woman's living a whole separate life, but she has a home up in like Malibu too that
Uh-huh.
she owns with her husband. It was wild to me.
Oh my god. Well,
Like just to
must
get
be
a little
nice.
space, just to get a little space, let me rent in Hancock Park.
Yeah, that must be nice. When I got to New York, my parents were like, "We're not helping you with anything." So I was living
Cardboard box.
cardboard box, baby. Cardboard freaking box. But the other thing I want to note too before we dig too deep into the crime scene and the aftermath,
Hmm.
and I promise we're getting there, was that Shelley wasn't the only one talking to other people though. It was actually Rod that had made the first move outside of their marriage.
Of
And
course.
of course, and that really was the catalyst that put this massive wedge in the relationship for Shelley because at this point, I don't think she didn't think that the backgammon thing was non-fixable. Like, I think she
Hmm.
could have seen past that, but the second he stepped outside of their marriage for her and her belief system, she was like, "That's it. Like, I'm over this." But
So interesting.
I know. It's really weird to think about how different people's background sort of inform like their values and their decision
Yeah,
making.
like what traditional values have so much to do with like protection against infidelity and divorce, but when it
Yeah.
comes to redeeming qualities or qualities that can be redeemed, I guess battling addiction in any sense is usually very forgivable.
Yeah, I guess so. But what I will say though is in this case, it all came back to backgammon because where do you think he met the woman that he stepped out outside of the marriage with?
Mhm.
He met her at a backgammon tournament. And actually, Shelley knew a lot of his friends in the backgammon world,
Mhm.
but this person she did not know. And her world was sort of flipped upside down one day when she found an email on Rod's computer. And I think that this was the year 2009, just earlier in the year, but it was between him and another woman that he had met. And it was very flirtatious. And she was able to infer, okay, he's probably having a sexual relationship with this person. But the interesting thing was she believed that he left that email up on purpose so that she would see it. And this
It's
was sort of
possible. I
yeah.
would I would low key think that too because
Y
I'm distrusting.
yeah, well, she thought, "Okay, this is his passive aggressive way of
Mhm.
telling me he wants out." So and that's what she thought. So she does end up confronting him about it, and oddly enough, he says, "No, I don't want out of the marriage. I just want an open marriage," which was even more outside of the realm of, like, her traditional values, and she was like, "Well, if he's propositioning me with this, I feel like he doesn't even know me anymore because to know me would be to know that that's not gonna be okay with me in any
Mhm.
context." So she's really examining her life here, having to take stock of the fact that she's got this massive career, 2 young kids, a marriage that's totally disintegrating, and then to make matters worse, Rod was reportedly very angry when she shut down the open marriage proposition and, like, to a point where he was maybe gonna be violent with her, and her
Hmm.
sister Eve knew about this, and Eve basically begged Shelley to kick him out of that other apartment and or just move out, to another place with her kids or come stay with her because she felt like this was a dangerous situation. So, let me just pause there for a second and ask you, like, do you feel like I'm being too harsh on Rod? Because I think there might
No.
be a handful of people that would say, maybe I am because, like, who's to say if you're in an unhappy marriage, like, asking if you'd be amenable to an open marriage. I think a lot of people do that.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the conversation that like incites would incite anyone to be like upset with him. It's the violence and it's the inclination towards violence when he doesn't seem to get his way is what
Yeah.
it seems like. I mean, people have conversations all the time, I think, about separating or having an open marriage, which could be synonymous for some people. So maybe it just depends on what context they were discussing it in. But I don't think it's relentless the way that we're like leaning into him. He clearly seems to have some serious issues where he's not prioritizing his partnership or his kids, his family first.
Yeah.
That's the baseline. He has what seems like a growing gambling addiction. And now he's sort of toying with a sentiment that she never signed up for. I
Yeah.
don't think that was ever, I would guess that was never a conversation they ever had at any point in their relationship about ever being open.
Yeah. It's just funny to consider because I feel like it's this weird kind of gray area where when you're in a partnership, like how open or how amenable should you be to like your partner's needs and desires. But yeah, again, I think it comes back to tradition here and belief systems and like it's a clear violation. So that's sort of why I'm like, I'm not afraid to kind of be harsh here because I think I think also the passive aggressiveness or the not being forthright with her first and letting her have to kind of follow the paper trail was also unfortunate.
What pisses me off about it, it's not just for her in the way that he seems like he's going about it. It's about protection of his reputation as well. So if
Uh-huh.
they're playing up this traditional thing, and it's never easy to say whether it originates from the couple, is it from the parents, is it from the family, is it from the reputation they have to upkeep within their community? It's difficult to say where it all stems from. But him saying, I would rather have an open marriage than publicly separate and possibly divorce, it's about protection for him,
Yeah.
I feel,
Yeah.
his image.
Yes. And I think a lot of that was coming from the parents, which we'll get to a little bit later. Now, unfortunately, Eve's hunch that Shelley might be in a dangerous situation was right, especially once Rod heard through the grapevine that Shelley was starting to talk to other men around town and like actually start going on some formal dates. And it's unclear to me if he was aware of it at this point, but she had also signed herself up for JDate, which was a Jewish dating website. And considering their tight knit social circle, I can imagine people had seen her on the site. And in his mind, this is
Mm.
also crazy to me. In his mind, this all counted as Shele having extramarital affairs, which just as being the woman, she was not allowed to do on his watch, which is just
Mhm.
hilarious to me.
Oh, so
But
it sounds like they are separated at this point. If
yes,
he
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, they're
Their
totally
textbook yeah, their textbook separated because she's going off doing her thing and he's been doing his thing. So
yes.
she just says like, "I don't want to stay married to you and be in an open thing. We're clearly separating and on the track for divorce, so I'm gonna go off and do my own thing dating wise in
Yeah.
the community."
Yeah. I think there was two kind of eras of the separation. It was like she's trying to hold on because she thinks it's just about his addiction, but
Mhm.
like clearly there's something happening with them. Let
Right.
me, put him separately away from me and the kids. And then once she realized, oh, this guy's cheating on me, I'm gonna go like live my own life and do my own thing.
Right.
So
That's the catalyst where she's like, "Forget it. I'll
yeah, 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 yeah.
I'll explore
Um,
outside."
yes. And I actually want to focus on one of his affairs in particular because she's gonna be a big part of this case. And I think she might be on the second page, but
Haven't been looking at the pictures. Hold on.
because you like to look at me.
I do
Uh,
well, you're telling me the
I
story.
know,
This is
I know,
also
I know. I'm
I
always
believe
like,
this is how the creepers, like, what high
yeah,
creepers, I believe this is how they watch it too, because I'm sure they do, like, check the pictures, but I feel like they do look at us. So
yes.
I try to sit in their seat.
Oh, totally.
This is
Well,
the woman oh, this is the sister Eve, okay.
so that's Eve, and then I think I've got a picture of a woman named Deborah Oles on that
Yes,
page.
you do.
Okay, so Miss Deborah. He had met Deborah Oles at one of these backgammon tournaments, and it didn't take very long before they took their relationship to the next level. And their relationship, according to Deborah, was very hot and heavy. It was very sexy, the idea of this whole affair, of course. But again, kind of
Mm,
oddly, she was a lot older than Rod. I'm not quite sure what their age gap was, but I think it was something like 9 years. I don't
hasn't
have
stopped him before.
yeah, well, exactly, and so she said that it was very flattering for her because she was like, "Why is this guy interested in me?" But anyways, just wanted to call that out. I think he sort of has a type, but I don't think that Deborah was the woman that was that initial email that, like, Shelley saw. I couldn't
Oh,
find that in the
no, someone
research.
else, okay.
I think it was somebody else because I think he had a lot of different affairs, but, I wanted to try to find them, but anyways, uh, they had a pretty serious and long-going relationship or would evolve into that, but Deborah, if he did have a lot of women he was talking to, stood out as the favorite, and their relationship was a part of the equation that led Rod to ask for the open marriage, which of course drove them
Mhm.
to separate, and for Shelley to start working with a divorce attorney shortly after.
Oh, she did?
She
Okay.
did. And from what I read, both of their families knew about the initial separation, but aside from Eve, had no idea the amount of contention that was bubbling under the surface. I think Shelley kept that pretty close to the chest to protect not only her children, but also Rod, even though he was making her suffer at tremendous levels. But it really reached its peak once Shelley started the divorce filing process, that it started to hit Rod, sort of like the magnitude of this whole situation. And this would all come out after Shelley's death. But during their initial divorce proceedings, Rod tried really hard to make Shelley look unstable to the point that he called up UBS and told them that she was on drugs, like hard drugs. It was obviously extremely embarrassing for Shelley given the fact that she worked with her father and brother and they come in and say, "Hey, we've got a call from like the higher ups that you're on cocaine. What's going on here?" So she's like, "It's all fake. I think this is Rod." And she gets tested and it's obvious that she's not on any sort of drugs, but she ended up retaliating and sort of flipped the script, and she made her attorney aware of his gambling addiction, who then made the judge who was reviewing the case aware. And after reviewing everything, the judge told Rod that he had to stop playing backgammon immediately, or else the divorce settlement was not going to go in the direction that he wanted. And really, this is where it started to get ugly because I think
Mhm.
Shelley took away the one thing that he like actually truly loved the most, which was gambling. And he started backgammon, I guess, but the gambling element, the addiction element, and he started
Mhm.
to lose it. And then not only that, but if she won, she would also get custody, full custody of both of their children,
Naturally.
of
Yeah.
course. So at this point, it's clear that something sinister is sort of happening behind the scenes. Eve has some sort of idea about it, but it's really between Shelley and Rod that know the truth. And things were not
Mm.
going to be obvious to investigators initially when they arrived on the scene of this sort of turmoil on December 31st. So let's talk about the crime scene and some of the things that initially stood out to police when they arrived. And I guess you can move to the third page where I've got some of the
Can
crime
I?
scene photos. But police have admitted that when they first arrived,
Oof.
nothing looked suspicious to them. The cabinet being off of the hinges and the stuff strewn everywhere looked pretty spot on for an accident. One of the officers I did see an interview, he said he did kind of have an inclination that maybe it was staged, but I'm sure you can see like in one of those pictures there. Do you see the thing with like the hairbrushes kind of standing straight up?
Thing with the
I don't
hairbrushes. Which picture is it?
I think it's on the let me see, like right underneath
On the sink or on the tub?
it's on the sink. I don't know
It's on the
why this stuck out to
Oh, yeah, I
me,
see that.
but
Okay.
it looks like very just like things placed in a way that doesn't look natural. I don't know how you feel.
I don't know. It's so I'd be very curious to take even a introductory forensics class about analyzing a scene and
Mhm.
how to spot telltale signs that something has been staged or adjusted.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm really bad at sort of deciphering what looks funny, I guess, in a scene. I just hit my mic.
Yeah. I can
So
still hear you.
is the assumption that the assumption is that she was getting into the tub and slipped and ripped the cabinet off the hinges. That's what presents.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
and the idea, remember how I said she's kind of short? She's like 5'4".
Yeah.
The idea that she might have been standing like at the lip of the tub at the end and then was reaching up to grab something out of that top cabinet and then slipped because it was wet and then
Oh
like hit her head
God.
and fell. Um, but it's funny you say the thing about like what to look out for because one of the things I think they missed initially that they have since thought was odd was that there was no towel anywhere, which you would think like if you're going to get in the tub, there would be a bath towel somewhere.
Mhm.
Um, but what's worse is that police botched the scene almost immediately. They didn't seal it off. They allowed family to come in. They allowed
My
religious
God.
they allowed religious figures to come in. Her rabbi came in almost immediately and cleaned up the mess.
Ah!
And unfortunately
Stop saying this.
I know.
It's
Well, let me
making
tell
me
you the hardest
upset.
stop in this case is that no autopsy was performed. And I don't know if you knew this because I had no idea before I started researching this, but in some Orthodox communities, it goes against their beliefs to do autopsies.
I have heard that before.
Okay. I did not know, so I was like, okay, I'm curious, like what the reasoning behind that could have been. So I saw that it's kind of on your level of interpretation or like observance of Orthodox, but for some Jews, it's about preserving the body in its exact form at the time of death.
I've heard
And
that. I've heard
okay,
that.
and my friend Haley, who's Jewish, was telling me there's a like Jewish law called I hope I don't butcher this halacha, which is like basically within that law, there's a clause that disrupting the body before you go to bury it can interfere with its ability to like resurrect someday. Which I did not know that. And
Mhm.
there's that, and then, let me see.
It sounds like a lot of people can easily get away with murder in this community if
Yes.
needed.
Yes. Oh, here's the other thing, is that a lot of times they don't do an autopsy because their belief system, they want the body to be buried within 24 hours.
Right, right, right,
Um,
right. It happens
so
very quick.
yeah, and they did that. They buried her almost immediately, and
Oh
her
my
sister
God.
Eve, though, after they do the Shiva, kinda sits down with her family and says, "You know, I knew things that I didn't share with you guys, and I wanna share them with you now." And after she talks to them about what she knew about their relationship, she says, "I think we need to hire a private investigator." And they do. They hire a man named Michael Swain, and hopefully my friend is gonna be like, "Don't say anything." This is the PI that my friend knew of that was like he was a big time PI on like the Upper West Side in Manhattan at the time. He was pretty
Mhm.
famous. But they this is when a lot of the stuff about how many people Rod was talking to came out. And not only that, but the tens of thousands of dollars that he had gambled away. And what was most shocking to me when I was doing the research was that Shelley had confided in some friends of hers that she believed Rod was surveilling her, that he had installed cameras and recording devices in the
Not off the
apartment.
table. We've seen this before.
I know, but I was like, oh my God. Like, every time, I feel like you and I both share that every time we get to that level, I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, that's so, the idea of being surveilled, but not being able to find the items is so scary to me.
Worse when you've experienced it.
Yeah.
May I tell you?
Wait. Baby. God, will we ever share that story?
I'm sure I have. I think I have.
Have we? Oh my
I worked a
God.
job when I was 24 as like a babysitter, like housekeeper, which is fine. I understand. Like people have nanny cams when you're around their kids. You should probably disclose that to the people who are working for you. However, I wasn't there with the kid. I was just house sitting for this
Yeah.
person for a weekend. I was like paid to be there. Cameras everywhere, hidden in clocks,
Hidden.
hidden
That's what it was.
in
Hidden
smoke
in
detectors.
clocks.
Because I saw this ugly ass clock, William Sonoma, and it was so ugly. And I just thought to myself, I was like, what an ugly clock. I'm like, it's crazy that he has two of those. And then I was like, why does he have two of those? Why
Right.
does he have a duplicate of the same clock, one in the kitchen, one in the dining room? And then I looked it up and I saw it was a spy clock.
Stop.
And suddenly that feeling of like you're on camera sets in. It was such a scary moment, Stu.
Yeah.
I can't even describe how disrupting that was.
Especially because I imagine it was like it was like up pretty high, like an aerial
Yeah,
shot of
huge.
you
It was a
around the
beautiful, huge house. It was a giant, giant ceiling, and it was all the way up. And I was like, what a weird ass placement for that ugly clock.
God,
Weird.
good on you for clocking it, for lack of a better phrase, for looking up and thinking it was weird. I've had the same thing, except I knew the camera was there and I forgot, and I was just mine was worse. That I was literally like dealing with the baby, like doing the little rocking chair thing, and the mom texts me and she goes, "Can you stop rocking the damn chair so hard?" I was like, "Huh, shoot."
You go.
Literally start spiraling out, and then it was like I could not think about being surveilled. But anyways,
Sorry, keep going.
no, I will press on. But her hunch was correct, and we'll get to more on that in just a little bit. But what Michael Swain was really interested in was taking another look at that crime scene and their bathroom. And he's really the one to call attention to how staged he thought everything looked. One thing the police had missed that he put together was that the screws were actually out of the hinges. And Michael believed that no one, especially like petite Shelley, would have had the strength while she was falling that quickly to literally pull the entire cabinet with such force that it jimmied the screws out
Yeah,
of
but
the
you would
actual
strip. You would
hinges.
basically strip it out.
Yeah. He was like, that does not look normal to me. And then this, coupled with the fact that he was able to confirm that Shelley was being surveilled, led him to plead with the family to please exhume the body. I think that there's something sinister that's happened here. And they reluctantly did. So
It's a really hard decision to make for a family.
I know.
Like I always think about that in the midst of like immeasurable grief. The idea that someone consenting to an autopsy alone, I think, takes a lot of like mental fortitude, but then to have a body that you've already buried and you've processed the burial exhumed to then have an autopsy done, it's a really hard thing, I would imagine, for a family to wrap their heads around.
And then of course the religious beliefs on top of that, where it literally like it's violating a core value for you at some level, is just, I think they really had to go back and forth on this decision. And I think Michael really, it was that. And then I forgot to mention one other thing. He went back and had extensive conversations with the officers about the scene when they first arrived, and he asked them one very important question that I'm kind of like, how did they not think of this? But he said, was his shirt wet? Was any of his clothing wet when you guys came in? And all the officers were like, no, we don't remember any part of him being wet. Which if you pulled the body out of the water and you're performing CPR for as long as he had been, he was like, and I think that it was all three of those factors: the surveillance, and then, this part, and then the
What
screws.
does it take to become an officer in the NYPD?
I know. I'm
Quizlet?
kind of like, isn't City supposed to be a little bit better?
No.
Like, I know. So let's talk about what they find when they exhume Shelley's body in April of 2010. So it hasn't been that long. It's only been a couple of months. The first major discovery was that Shelley's hyboid bone was broken, which your hyboid is like right here. It's this like U-shaped bone under your jaw. And that was pretty
Never heard
much
of that.
a dead. I hadn't either, so I had to like look it up. But right here, and if that thing is broken, it's pretty much a dead giveaway for a medical examiner that manual strangulation has been
Yeah.
involved in some way. Um, so they find this, and then finding number two were scratch marks on her hands, and then bruises on her lips and on her hands, and then finding number three, which actually had nothing really to do with the autopsy, but the timing. This discovery was made right when they had pulled the body, they had exhumed the body. And it's funny because when I read this in the research, I was like, oh my God, the ammonium glycolate. Like it reminded me so much of like the Legally Blonde moment where they're
Hmm.
able to determine who did it. But Michael determines that Shelley had been to the hairdresser the day before and had gotten a keratin treatment done, which if you know anything about keratin treatments, you're not supposed to shower
She wouldn't
for,
have showered.
yeah, she wouldn't have showered for like at least 3 days. Not only that, you're not even supposed to like sweat or do anything. So it was all three of these things that the medical examiner decides to rule the cause of death from
Wow.
undetermined to homicide. So pretty quickly, we're like, okay, Eve's like, I was right all along. Something is wrong. So
Mhm.
the evidence surrounding this case is still all pretty much circumstantial, though, which is so crazy to conceive. But if they were going to try to pin Rod for this, their case was going to have to be air freaking tight because there was no DNA evidence anywhere collected from the scene. And really, it just stunk because they basically brought in the rabbi like within I guess, a couple of hours of her being dead, and he like kind of peroxided a lot of the scene, which was like customary, but still, it was just like, oh God, like we're gonna have to really build out this case in order to nab Rod.
Yeah, that's tough. That's
Yeah.
hard.
But there were two nuggets of information that convinced the DA working on this case, a guy named Matthew Bogdanos, that his case against Rod was going to be strong enough to present to a jury. So, number one, it was revealed that Rod thought he stood to inherit Shelley's estate when she passed because their divorce wasn't finalized yet. And that number was going to be $5.2 million, which
Mhm.
is obvious motive. But on top of that, there was an email that he found on Shelley's computer asking her divorce attorney if she could start to write Rod out of the will just a couple of days before she died. And they were pretty convinced that Rod had read this because he had a surveillance software on her computer.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yes. And I should have mentioned that. That's when I said we'll get to the surveillance, that he basically had like, from what I read, like a viewfinder. So he could get on his computer and log in and basically act like he was on Shelley's.
That's crazy. That's
Crazy.
crazy he had
Yeah,
that.
I know. And also, I was like, "Damn, did they have, like, a viewfinder software back then?" But I guess they did. I thought that was, like, newer technology.
2009, I mean, it was a while ago, but not that long ago.
Yeah. And then number 2, Matthew was able to convince a couple of star witnesses to take the stand. Now, the trial didn't begin until 2019, almost 3 years after the charge against Rod was initially made. I think there were several appeals or like pre-motions that were made on Rod's end that caused a pretty large delay in the start, but that was all right because it just gave the prosecution a little bit more time to build up their case even more.
Mhm.
So when the trial eventually did begin in January of 2019, it was game on. And we're going to talk about some of the witnesses that were called up because I think for me, and it's funny, I just kind of wanted to get your opinion. This is a little bit of a different case for Creep Time because I feel like the really interesting part about this case is like sort of the aftermath. Like it's pretty, I know the way I set it up, it's pretty obvious that Rod is going to be implicated in some capacity, but there is so much that comes out about him and just like the secrets involved that
Mm.
I wasn't expecting. So I'm curious like how you're feeling about just in the context of like the episodes we cover. It's kind of like a different tone.
It's true that I don't really know how it's going to end because I think we're on the same page where, of course, we know that he's a shady character and he more than likely had something to do, if not everything to do, with her murder. But it's really tough with cases like this from cases we've looked at in the past where if it's just riding on circumstantial evidence, like you
Yeah.
said, it has to be airtight.
Mhm.
There's no room for error because once you lose it, it's kind of gone if you're
Yeah.
trying to nab somebody. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to see how they're going to build the case, knowing that the scene is compromised, knowing that, I mean, you would think from the second autopsy or the only autopsy and them exhuming the body, them ruling it a homicide, that that would be significant enough where I don't know. In my mind, it would just be easy enough to like fill in the blank, but I guess not in a court of law.
Well, same in my mind, and I'll tell you, we'll walk through how they, kind of, especially with like the hyoid bone thing. They had a whole
Mhm.
story around what that was and why it wasn't a strangulation because I had the
Oh, the
same
defense
thoughts.
does?
Oh yeah, and
Oh.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's like this case actually kind of reminded me of I think it was Mike Williams, the one where the mom had kind of been going back to police and saying, "I think there's foul play. I think there's foul play involved," and they
Mhm.
eventually start to build out the case, but it was the same sort of situation where when they went into that, trial, it was like, "If we screw this up and we don't win, they're never gonna be tried again." You get like a one shot at this. Of course,
Right.
you can go through appeals and everything, but at this point, it was a decade after she had died, so that always kind of
I didn't realize it had been that long.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
It also it's I'm curious if creepers will think of this as well, but it reminded me a lot as you've been telling it about the staircase. The case of the
yeah,
staircase
it is very
and sort
similar.
of how so much of that case sits in this like place of mystery for people, although it seems very unambiguous on either side to other people. But when it gets to court, it's so difficult because the defense really comes in to argue the possibility of an accident. It's
Yes.
feeling like a similar setup.
Yes, it is so I didn't even think about that. It is really similar to the staircase and sort of their, like, personalities at some level. Rod and I'm forgetting the guy's name. Michael?
Oh,
What's his
Michael, yeah.
Michael. They have kinda similar personalities where I think that they could charm the pants off of a lot of people, which I think a lot of, uh I don't wanna claim that he is one, but a lot of socio or psychopaths have that ability, but, it's funny. They do kinda remind me of each other now that you mention that. Um, but yeah, let's press on and we'll go to the trial because it gets pretty interesting, pretty juicy. So the prosecution is going to call up their first witness, which was the Covlin children's nanny. And she testified that she had witnessed multiple incidents of abuse between Rod and Shelley, and she had kept it secret for years.
Wow.
She recounted a time that Rod had apparently thrown Shelley on the ground in front of her. She revealed that Shelley had confided in her, that she had feared for her life sometimes, and I thought this was really interesting. She said that the night before Shelley was killed, she remembered Rod asking if she was going to stay the night. And this was really weird to her because apparently Rod like barely ever interacted with her.
Mhm.
She felt like he was very like flippant towards her because she was the nanny, if you catch my drift. And she just remembered thinking this is so weird. He has never spoken to me before. And if he has, it's been like, get me this, get me that, very demanding, not like, are you gonna be here tonight? Like, it's very strange. And she also said she like hardly ever stayed over with the kids, so doubly strange. They also called the divorce attorney to the stand, who described how Rod had done the whole drug scheme. And this, I was like, oh my God, this guy is nuts. He had tried to frame Shelley as a sexually abusive mother toward their son, Miles. Apparently, Rod had at one point driven his son, Miles, to the hospital and told him to tell the doctor that mommy had been touching him, which is just so horrendous to put your child in that uh, predicament. But
My
the
god.
attorney also described the surveillance that Shelley was under, talked about that viewfinder software, so that some of their emails had probably been read, the ones describing how he was going to be written out of the will.
Mhm.
And then they, of course, called attention to his gambling addiction and how he had the perfect motive to kill Shelley for her money because at this point he had gambled so much of it away. And even though a lot of people didn't know this, he was no longer working as a stockbroker. They
Oh, I
also,
didn't realize that was a public secret.
yeah, well, I think to a lot of people, they just kind of maintain like, oh, like how does Rod make his money? Like, I don't think that they talk to people about like, oh, Rod's no longer working at, you know, uh, Goldman Sachs or wherever he was working. I think it was just kind of like, don't ask, don't talk about it. they were good at kind of like circumventing his career in their social scene because
Hmm.
it looked like on the outside he was making a ton of money. Um, so they call up a friend of Shelley's, also a woman named Melissa Field, who was one of the last people to have ever seen Shelley alive the night before she died. And she testified that they had met up for dinner the night before, and Shelley had confided that she thought that Rod was tracking her and that she was really worried about her life and the lives of her children. And they actually showed CCTV footage of Shelley coming back from the dinner with Melissa back into their building at around 10 p.m.
Hmm.
Um, I think the picture I saw, you can't really make it out, but I guess from the footage that was shown in court, you could see that she looked a bit frazzled. And then I thought this was an interesting nugget. And I couldn't find any when I was doing the research, like any video of Rod or if this was even real, but I did see it mentioned, so I just want to bring it up
Hmm.
that Rod had apparently tried to make himself seen on that same camera, and I don't think it worked. But at around like 4 in the morning of the 31st, when she would pass, then I also saw reports that there was no CCTV footage. But the interesting nugget here was that the doorman remembered him coming down very early in the morning, and same kind of situation as the nanny. The doorman was like, Rod Covlin never talked to me. And when he came down very early that morning, he struck up a conversation with me, asked if he could get me a treat from the bodega or like from the grocery store. And then when I said no and was kind of like, God, that guy's never talked to me before, I remembered him coming back with 2 large liters of seltzer. And police have always kind of wondered if that seltzer was also used to clean up part of the crime scene on his end. I just thought that was an
Hmm.
interesting nugget.
That is interesting. I mean, because
Yeah,
people use seltzer to get stains out of things.
I guess so.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I mean. That's what I've always seen that in movies, and actually from my great aunts. Like whenever there was like a stain on the rug, they would say, "Oh, like wine spills, get some seltzer water."
yeah, get some seltzer.
That would make
Um,
sense.
it was also just funny to think about, just in the context of like living in New York City, that like the nannies and the doormen and like the people that I I think what sticks out to me about it is him thinking like these people would never call me out in some way, if that makes sense. Like it's just so he thinks he's above them in some way that they wouldn't notice him or wouldn't notice things. They're like the most observant people ever. They're around you all the time. I don't know if
Mhm.
you would agree with me on that, but that's just how it struck me.
No, of course, I would. I think
Mm.
it's interesting though that they had kept their silence or kept these things to themselves. It sounds like until well after, almost a decade after her
Mhm.
death.
Yeah. Well, I
Because
think there was questioning or prosecution was working with them in those like 3 years as they were getting ready for the trial. But yeah,
right,
they
like
had kept
maybe they would have been interviewed if this had been seen as a murder from the jump,
yeah.
but it was not.
Yeah. But really, our star witness is going to be that woman I was talking about earlier, Deborah Oles.
I
And
had a
she,
feeling. I had a feeling.
baby,
Okay.
she is the rock star in this case. And they definitely saved the best for last. She testifies last and she reveals another murder plot that he was cooking. And this one was for his own parents who were sitting in the courtroom hearing all of this for the very first time.
Was there ambiguity that this guy's a sociopath? I knew it was up in the air, but I think that we're inching closer towards a decision.
Think we are. And but the craziest thing is there are people that say that this is an accident and that he is innocent to this day,
Who?
including his own family, of course, but they're friends of
Well,
his
they're
too.
deluded. Family of murderers, they're deluded. They don't
Yeah,
know what's
yeah,
going
yeah.
on.
But Deborah, she said that on New Year's Day in 2010, so after the day that Shelley died, she got a call from Rod saying that his wife had died tragically in an accident. And even in that moment, she thought that something didn't quite feel right. She actually got a knock at the door a couple of months later from police who asked her some questions about Rod. And she didn't spill too much at the time because they were still kind of together, but she had a hunch that they probably had access to his emails or his computer because they kept asking her if she could show them logs of when they had been playing backgammon together online. And she kind of cut that line of questioning short and said she had to like get back to work or whatever she had to go do. But she remembered
Backgammon.
thinking,
I gotta get back to
I got
playing.
to get back to backgammon. But she
Mhm.
remembered thinking, I think this guy might have killed his wife. But it's really what happened in 2012 that shocked the courtroom. So at this point, Rod had been living upstate in Scarsdale with his parents, Dave and Carol Covlin. I think I've got a picture of them on there too. They're kind of interesting looking folks. But after Shele died, he could no longer afford, of course, that apartment that she had been paying for. And he went up to live with his parents, and he did not like living there with his parents, and they did not love having him there.
Hmm.
And his children were also there, by the way, because custody was actually given to Dave and Carol after Shele died. Um, so Deborah remembered a time that Rod called her and said, I think I'm going to hatch a plot to kill my parents, with the idea that if he did this, he would not only inherit their money, but he would gain full custody of his children back. And he described in detail to Deborah how he was going to set their house on fire with them in it. And Deborah is the reason that he didn't go through with it, actually. She asks him how he's going to ensure that the kids weren't there. And she pokes holes in his entire idea, because if he did it when the kids were there or weren't there, it would look obviously suspicious. But if he did it when the kids were there, but somehow like miraculously returned right in the nick of time to save them, that was also going to look weird. And he agrees, but it doesn't stop his scheming. He also shares a plan with her to have his daughter put rat poison in his parents' tea, and maybe call it parental intuition, but his parents ended up kicking him out of the house in 2012 because his behavior had become so erratic around them.
I could imagine.
Yeah. And when this had happened, Deborah decided to get an apartment for the two of them. And she admits that this was a terrible mistake on her part, because she said that that's what.
You're about a decade too late, girl.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
into
like,
realizing this is a mistake.
history is repeating itself. She says that when she things just got even worse with their relationship, it got more rocky when they moved in, but she remembered a drive that they were taking from New York City to their apartment, which was just a little bit north of the city, where he said to her, "You have to help me kill my parents." And she said, "I'm literally not going to do that. This whole idea is stupid and it's
Could
scaring
you
me."
imagine someone having a conversation like that with you? Like,
No.
that this just blows my mind
I
that
know.
conversations like this seem to happen.
I know.
You
And that
have to help me kill my parents.
you have to help me kill my parents, and also that you can be in love with a person like that at some
I was going
level.
to say it was weird as hell. I mean, Deborah's not without sin. I will tell you that much,
Of
because
course
it's
not.
weird as hell to even stay with the man, even if you believe that his wife had this tragic accident and she died in this horrible way in this home with their kids, and you're still with the guy.
Exactly. Which, and we'll get to it, but I think that the prosecution was like, she's going to be our star witness. And then the defense kind of comes in and takes your side and is like, we are going to annihilate this woman on the stand. But before we get to that, I will say that
Mhm.
she says to him in the car, you're going to kill me. Like, I mean, she's starting to see how everything is shaking out on her end of things. And his
Mhm.
response was, well, no, 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 I would never kill you. I only would ever kill somebody if they're trying to get in the way of me and my children, the children that he's literally trying to frame for murder. So like you were saying, I have thoughts on Deborah as well.
Mhm.
But it was definitely a risky move to put her on the stand. But one thing that helped her case was that the second the two of them broke up in 2014, she went to police and told them everything that she knew. And I think that it actually was really one of the things that helped them solidify their decision to press charges against him the following year in 2015. So she did have that on her side that made her look better, that she immediately went to
No, I
police.
mean, she's still a valuable witness. Like, she still has
Yeah,
really valuable insight, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every incredibly valuable witness who helps like close a case, if this reaches a closure point, is without fault.
right,
Like,
right.
she could be a very flawed person, and clearly I think she is.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when Deborah was cross-examined, like I was saying, I don't think the prosecution anticipated how hard the defense was going to go after her. And remember, she's the last witness, so it's sort of like, oh shoot, was that a misstep? And they showed all of these emails that Rod, I am sure, had helped them cherry pick, that really painted her in this light of like an obsessive ex and how she was this scorned woman. And the prosecution was definitely worried. And when the defense did their closing statements, they hammered home the idea that there was no DNA or physical evidence that tied Rod to Shelley's death. And they also claimed that he never had a key to Shelley's place. So how could he possibly get in? And then, like I was telling you earlier, I wanted to know how they explained away the freaking hyoid bone being broken. And they said that that was because they had screwed up when they exhumed the body and they had broken bones. So it was up in the air which way.
Well, we've seen that before too, actually.
Oh,
Now,
we
now that
have?
you've said it, I'm thinking of Mitrice Richardson when they found that body because she was so far decomposed that the head was found severed, and they made an argument to say, well, when she was being moved, the head disconnected from the torso.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, not to say, I mean, it's very possible that it's maybe that did happen, but it just creates a lot of confusion. It creates like fodder in court with defense versus prosecution. When I hear like things like this from the prosecution side, where they're like, "We didn't think they would go after her," as if she's like a scar-free woman and like
Yeah.
she maybe doesn't have a checkered past when it comes to being with this man for the last 14, 12 years. It makes me feel like I have to go to law school or something.
I know.
Like maybe the bar is too low.
Baby, maybe the bar is too easy to pass is really the tea. I swear to God, we might have to come up with a phrase for legal, including can't trust county, and then we'll figure out something.
You can usually
legal.
you can usually have some faith in legal, but
Yeah.
this isn't even, it's not malicious. It's just like sometimes you didn't think of that they were going to poke holes in her past as if she's squeaky clean.
I know.
Look at who she's been with.
I know. But they were worried. Like when they did their closing
I would be too.
statements, they were worried. Yeah. And like as I was doing the research, I was like, how does this go? Like, please God. But thankfully, within a day of deliberation, the jury comes back and they find Rod Covlin guilty of second-degree murder on April 10th, 2019. Like beat a sweat, wiping it away if I'm the prosecutor. And as for Rod's parents, despite hearing all this testimony that he tried to kill them several times, they have maintained that their son would never do this and that Deborah Oles was just a crazy ex looking for her 5 minutes of fame, which that's also just got to be such a strange concept, having to decide, hearing that in live time, if you're going to believe that it's true or not, or like how long you sit with it. I can't even wrap my head around that. But what's even stranger and sadder to me is that his children, who are now grown adults, continue to live with their grandparents until they went off on their own. And they also maintain the belief that their father is innocent, even despite the times he literally tried to frame them for murder and, of course, like manipulate little Miles into thinking his mom sexually abused him. Not only that, but the kids are supposedly not in touch with their Aunt Eve or Shelley's side of the family, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just to wrap this up, it's just interesting, I think, to reflect on the concept that humans have this insane ability to compartmentalize, because Shelley did it with Rod. And I think, unfortunately, so have his parents and his children. And I assume it's just years of manipulation and dealing with a narcissist. But I hope that someday, despite him being behind bars, his grip will loosen and maybe his children will be able to at least see him for who he really is, and they get the help that they probably need and deserve, of course. And I know that's easier said than done when, it's your own dad, but I really, that's what I walked away from this feeling like. How could you hear about your dad trying to do all of this at your expense and still, like, I was reading statements from his daughter about, how innocent, how much she believes her dad is innocent in all of this. And I just was like, God, the level of manipulation must have been so insane. And I wonder, throughout all these years after the case is wrapped up, if that's continued with letters. And I don't know. I should probably have looked into that more. But
I think it's more common than we think sometimes, especially when there's one parent who's lost very tragically. And obviously most people would agree it's a murder, except for apparently his children or her children. But it's reminded me actually of the case that we looked at with Alyssa Turney and her younger sister, Sarah Turney, who for a very long time, had sort of infamously held on to the grip that her father was innocent.
mm-hmm.
It took a very long time, and then I think a turning point of just being inundated with the evidence over and over again that seemed irrefutable, where that part of your brain that has shut down the possibility of guilt has a reckoning, and you have to admit what's before your eyes.
Yeah.
So I do think it's possible that kids can turn around and see family members, loved ones for who they really are and really process that trauma. But I can imagine losing a mother in that way and then kind of losing your father to this like decade long battle of like, is he guilty? Is he not? And being with
Mhm.
these, what sounds like eccentric grandparents who are brainwashing them. They're not really set up for anything else.
Yeah. I
How could we assume that they would ever come to a normal and rational explanation of the events that took place?
How old do you remember how old Alyssa was when that all happened?
She was a high school senior, I believe, because she
Okay.
was going to a graduation party. So she had to be 16, 17, I'm going to guess.
Okay.
Maybe
I
even 18. Probably, I think she was turning 18, which is why at a certain point, police stopped looking for her because they said she's an adult. So she's not really a runaway. She's an adult who left town.
Yeah. And how old was her sister? She was younger, right?
She was pretty young at the time. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I can't think off the top of my head how young she must have been, but I think for some reason she was under 10.
See, that's kind of why like I find it so fascinating, I guess, in a really morbid way, is that I wonder how much your age, I'm sure your age plays into that, like how long it eventually takes you to get out of that brainwashing headspace. I just think
Mhm.
it's so terrible that they both were so young, like 9 and 4 years old, to then just be subjected to someone like that. And then I do kind of wonder like what the decision was, I guess, to put them with his parents and not her parents, but I didn't go into that, but
I thought you said
just
something before that made me think about that too. You'd mentioned something, I guess, about like there were already issues in the early discussions of divorce with the judge when it came to like who was going to be awarded custody. And then he's trying to put this like drug plot on her. And then she's revealing some information that he has a real gambling issue. I'm sure that was still all a part of the decision, regardless of whether or not they thought that he was guilty for murder. They said
yeah.
this is still a parental figure who we would assume we have to put custody into his hands, but he seems unstable. So maybe the natural inclination is go to the grandparents.
Yeah. I just wondered though. I was like, I wonder if the natural thing is you go to the father's parents or the mother's parents,
That's interesting.
or if you just build a case, I guess, on either side of who's the more fit. Because obviously, like I don't know how much this plays into it, but like they had a a nice large home in like upstate, could take care
Yeah.
of two kids maybe
Well, I
easier
guess
their age.
I'm curious how the attorneys who listen to Creep Time would rationalize that. I wonder if
Yeah.
it has to do about with like visitation rights, because if he could make a case or his attorneys can make a case that like his family parents live in upstate and he's going to move there, leave the city for a period of time, albeit whether he's going to live with them or says he's going to get an apartment up there, maybe the judge says, well, that would make sense for visitation rights. If you want to see them every other weekend or on a Wednesday, at least you're closer to them proximity wise and it's more reasonable.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah. I have no idea either.
And just like that, I have
And
not
just
passed the bar.
like just like that, we are now. What do I always say? Celestine and Dean,
Celestine
attorneys at
and Dean.
large.
Celestine and Peen is what our law
That's right.
firm
That's
is.
right. But yeah, that's really all I have on the case of Shele Covlin. I just thought it was a really interesting sort of like twist at the end there because I doing the research, I had no idea how it was going to go really.
Yeah.
But just a tragic story of just straight up manipulation for so long on multiple different people. It was fascinating to me.
And he is behind bars today.
Yes, yes. And actually, I'll mention this. One of the things I was reading that shortly thereafter, he was caught on footage in the prison showing how he chokeholded, they believe, Shele. They believe that's what he was showing some of the other prisoners.
My God.
Yeah, the guy's wacky. But I think
I
he
gotta
only
see his
got,
picture again. Hold
yeah, I
on.
think he only got 25 years.
Really?
Yeah,
Because you know it's not going to be a full 25 years.
I
They
know.
always do less.
I know.
Oh, I
So
hate that.
I
I
know. I'll
hate
keep
that.
tabs on this. I mean, I want to keep tabs on it in case he ever were to be released. It seems like it's not a strong possibility, but um, yeah,
He was
just
sentenced in 2014 or 2012. Do you remember? Or
no, it was
sometime around that time.
20. Wait, when did they go to trial?
I think he said
20,
2012.
yeah. Oh, he was found guilty in 2019.
Oh, in 2019. Oh, it took
Yeah,
that long.
yeah. Almost a
Wow.
full decade after she had died. And now he's
That's a
40. I guess, how old would he be now? I think he was 47
Well, he
at the
was
time of that.
36 in 2009. So
hmm
whatever date today is,
Yeah.
minus 2009. Add that to his age.
Yes. But baby, that's all I got for you.
Really interesting case. Really sad case,
Yeah,
too.
it's very sad. Like, yeah, just so much like trying to protect kind of got in the way of things being discovered, I think, faster than they probably would have. But
Mhm.
and I mean that like protecting, of course, values and beliefs, but also just like protecting reputations and like protecting the children. And just it was sort of one of those situations where I think if everybody had sort of known the truth, things would have moved along a lot faster. But
Yeah, and it's always hard to arrive at that when silence kind of permeates on all fronts of this because granted I'm happy that a lot of people did eventually come forward. It's something we've seen repeatedly where it's a bit too late
yeah,
often,
yeah,
where some of this information, albeit from the nanny, from the doorman, from Deborah, like that's all too late.
hmm
That's too late to be revealing. And I think that's something people should take away from this. Like if something goes down, I understand the inclination where there's a fear of coming forward because you think it could cause more grief and more pain for a family that's already in pain. But if something feels wrong, it's probably wrong.
yeah, yeah. If you see something, say something.
I mean, it seems like they really didn't come forward until they were coaxed a decade after the fact. And I think that hindered or at least gave fodder to the defense to like hold up their side of this for as long as they could.
Yeah.
This very well could have been one of those cases that goes the other way
Oh,
where they
definitely.
can't get him. So I
Yeah.
think it's very lucky that they got him for what they did.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was just saying, I'm glad Deborah's testimony did what it was supposed to do and it didn't go the other way. But
Thanks, Deb.
yeah,
Appreciate
thanks,
you.
Deborah. Thanks, Deborah Oles.
Mm. That box thing still scared me.
Yeah, what the? Did it move again?
No, not for the whole episode.
I haven't seen you get that scared
It
in a
freaked me
minute. Your
out.
eyes immediately welled with water.
It freaked me out. It was the timing of it. Like I have to go back and listen to exactly what you said, but it was the timing of as soon as you said something, it just flung open. And I was like,
Yeah. Oh, no. You know what it was? It was that my friend, I mentioned something like kind of personal to me, which is that a friend of mine knew about this case and knew the PI, Michael Swain, that was like involved.
I think the second you said Michael Swain, that's
Yeah,
when
it was like,
flew open. Weird.
very, very interesting.
Take that for the sign it may be, creepers.
Yes, Ivies. And we hope that nothing spooky. Well, maybe we do hope something mildly spooky happens to you over the weekend. Something funny.
Well, if you're watching this on Saturday or Sunday, you've been looking at me for over an hour,
Yeah.
so that's probably the scariest thing that's
the
going to
spook,
happen.
honey. Oh, well, I want to thank you for letting me go through that case with you. That was
Thank you.
very interesting to kind of on a cerebral level dive into some of that stuff with you. And creepers, thank y'all so much for listening to another Friday episode. And with that, we're going to say goodbye.
And good luck.
Bye, creepers.
Bye, guys.